is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 381. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line from Denver, Colorado, fresh off of a marathon stream session, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how was the stream?
It was great. I actually streamed for like 5 hours, which I really don't normally do, but I've been itching to stream and played a vintage and like, I don't know, 3 or 4 Modern Masters drafts. I was efficient, even though I did okay and I'm not great. So I don't know. It was fun. Modern Masters is a really very, very fun format.
Yeah, I've done 4 drafts myself, and so far it's proving to be, well, let's just say it's right up our alley. There's a lot to do. I haven't drafted any of the fair decks yet, and maybe they're good. I will say I keep hoping to play against them, and that hasn't been happening. So I don't know. We'll keep an eye on it. We might revisit Modern Masters again for, half an episode in a week or two, just after we've got a bunch of more drafts under us. It's kind of a conflicting thing for Luis and I, because we know that you, the listener, don't get to do a ton of these drafts. So if we spend a whole bunch of showtime talking about it, it doesn't really, we're worried that it won't benefit you directly enough, where you've either done your one draft of Modern Masters or maybe you've got one more to go or something, and then it's kind of over. So we're a little hesitant to do that, but, maybe we'll touch back on it just so that we have like a point of reference for people to look back for when it comes back, or if they end up with a box of it and their friends are going to draft it or something like that. Okay. Well, we've got a kind of a mishmash of stuff to go over on the show today. We're getting into the nitty gritty of the phases and steps. We're also going to talk about Magic Online. We haven't touched on that in a little while. And things have changed quite a bit on Magic Online, and we're going to do a Crack-a-Draft for Aether Revolt. Before we get into all that, I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com, the place to go on the internet for everything you need, Magic related, of course. You can find singles there, and you can find sealed product. Like if you want to get Modern Masters, you can go there and order up a box. By the way, a box of Modern Masters comes with 24 boosters rather than 36, so just enough for an 8-person draft. So keep that in mind if you are going to order it, that you're not going to have extra booster packs laying around for that. But I definitely recommend it. I've already done one live draft. It was really fun. And I wouldn't be surprised if I got another one in before it was done. Otherwise, the majority of my work will be done, of course, on Magic Online. But yeah, if you need those, channelfireball.com is the place to go. And of course, while you're there, check out the free content. I mean, this is just too good. Like, you get to go to Channel Fireball and just find awesome free content from some of the best content creators and players out there in the world. I mean, CFB just has it on lock, and it's fantastic. I mean, you can see stuff from Reed Duke, Owen Turntenwald, Luis Scott-Vargas. And, they're going to teach you how to play, similar to what we do here. They care about helping you get better. They know that that's a big part of why you come to the site. And to watch the videos and watch people work through their thought processes is something you can really take a lot from. And it's free. It's just sitting right there on the front page of channelfireball.com. Please do check them out. We highly recommend it. Also, the show is brought to you, of course, by you, the patron, the Patreon. Our patrons on there are fantastic. They help support the show. They help keep it going and push us in new directions and open up, cool new things for the show. And we really appreciate it. Patreon.com/limited resources is where you can go to sign up for that. All the details are there. And of course, one of the great things you get about being a patron is you get access to the Question of the Week thread. This one comes from listener Gabriel, who says, "Hey, Marshall. Hey, Luis." He says, "I come from a very weird Magic background, as Commander and EDH was the first format that really hooked me. I still play more EDH than any other format, but I started to dabble in other formats, and I also started to draft more and more with the release of leagues on Magic Online, and I quite enjoy it. I started to notice something, though. In special draft formats, I usually do reasonably well, like, for example, Cube or the Modern Masters series or any of the Masters sets. I'm pretty confident that I'll at least 2 for 1 a draft, if not win it. But my successful rate in normal drafts is not nearly as good. I tried to pinpoint the flaw in my drafting, and I started to notice that I have problems with picking just okay cards. I find myself picking cards that do something, like Welder Automaton, over some vanilla or French vanilla creatures, just because I'm somewhat underwhelmed by those creatures. And I often find myself in situations where my creatures do something but get quickly outclassed by your run-of-the-mill 5-mana 4/4. Do you have any tips on how I might adjust my card evaluation for normal sets? Thanks for the great content you put out every week. Regards, Gabriel." Interesting question, huh, Luis? Gabriel, is very self-reflective and is able to see, hey, I like these sort of flashy, powerful cards, and it's turning me off to the more vanilla bread and butter type cards. But he's correctly recognized that this is actually a leak. This is a problem. This is something that should be addressed.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I mean, as someone who does do a lot of, cube and now literally was just doing Modern Masters drafting, I totally know what Gabriel's saying. 5 mana 4/4 or whatever, 4 mana 4/3 just aren't. They're not even things I register as cards in those formats. Whereas Seagate Oracle, like 2 mana, 3 mana 1/3 that like draws you a card. That's definitely a good card in like Cube and Modern Masters. You need to readjust a little when you do normal formats, and I think part of that is just knowing, even if you don't feel it, knowing what the good stats are for the format, knowing that 4 mana 4/3 is good, or 5 mana 4/4 is playable, or 5 mana 4/5. Like in Kaladesh, the Wayward Giant and Bastion Mastodon ended up being perfectly playable. Knowing that the stat lines you need are which ones are acceptable. This is kind of why we have the vanilla test, right? Knowing which ones are at or above the curve and just following it until you've internalized it is kind of what you just need to do. Like if you're saying, I know this is good, yet I don't take it, well, you need to just make the leap of just taking it. There's no secret code. It's just like, I know that 4 mana 3/4 is a playable card in this format, so I'll have to take it over to 2 mana 2/1 with an ability sometimes because I just know that I need some amount of stats in my deck, just raw stats.
Yeah, that's the same thought I had too, is that, Gabriel, you just need a little slap here because you know that if what is most important to you is winning. Now, that doesn't have to be, but since you're listening to this show, I'm going to assume that it is because that's what's most important to Luis and I for the most part. When we do draft videos and streams and stuff, maybe, we'll splash a little entertainment value in there. But I'll tell you what, if you watch Luis draft at the Pro Tour or, at a GP or whatever, and same thing with me on the rare occasions that I get to do that, I'm drafting for real. And I have no favorites. No, I do not care. I'll just take whatever card I think is best for my deck, for the format, for the situation. And if all it has is a big block of flavor text on the front, I don't even care. It's just how good is the card. And, I think that Gabriel knows. I think that which cards are good. You're just reticent to actually commit to just saying, well, I'm just going to take some vanilla card. Do it. Take it. It's the card that's going to be best for your deck. And don't make the excuse of like, well, I think I need more from these decks, or I think that I need things to do more. They do plenty. Sometimes just turning creatures sideways is good enough. Okay. We've got a bunch of Crack-a-Packs. I've got a Modern Masters Crack-a-Pack. I just have to do this. We were talking about it, and I even walked down to the store to get one for the show. And then we've got the Crack-a-Draft as well. So let's do the Modern Masters Crack-a-Packs first because these are sweet. Oh, yeah, that smells nice. Scorched Rusalka is the first card out.
This card actually has impressed me just because, I haven't played with the card, obviously.
I was going to say, you haven't played with Scorched Rusalka. I haven't either.
It's red for a 1/1. You can pay a red and sack a creature to deal 1 damage to your opponent. Or I guess target player, actually.
Yeah.
But every time my opponent's cast it against me, it's actually been kind of good. So it looks crappy, but it's good in the threatened deck or token aggro deck. So certainly not something I'm even in the ballpark of first picking, but this card's probably better than you think it is.
Yeah, you would definitely want to be heavy red. Ghostly Flicker is next. That's 2 and a blue for an instant. Exile 2 target artifacts, creatures, or lands you control, then return them to the battlefield under your control at instant speed.
Key part in the blue-white blink deck, but not something you want to take early.
Yeah, and even then, I don't know if I agree with key part. I think it's a playable in those decks, but I think I usually only want one. And a lot of times I've found that I can make these things there's a lot of effects that do this type of thing. So I think it's a desirable card, but I think that, you can totally have a really good version of the deck without it, for example.
Oh, yeah, definitely true.
Rootborn Defenses, 2 and a white for an instant, populate, and creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Is that good? I don't know.
No,
I mean,
I don't even think it's good. I think like if you're the heavy green-white populate deck, it's fine. But I really am not impressed with the card.
Yeah, I made my opponent discard a card in a game, and they discarded one of these, and I thought, oh well, I didn't really get my value there. And then they played one later in the game. They had 2 in their hand, and it still didn't really do anything. And I'm just like, okay, this is just not working out well. Like, Rootborn Defense is probably not that great. Madcap skills, still stealing games. 1 or red for an aura enchants creature. The creature gets +3/+0 and has menace. Terrible card, but my God, it gets in a lot of damage. Yeah, it's awful though. In a land of Dinrova Horrors, Mist Ravens, Core Hookmasters, forget about it. Like, this is not the type of card I want to do. Though I did lose to it. I lost a game.
Yeah, it's a card you can lose to, certainly, but it's just not something I'm interested in putting in my deck.
Now, what about this guy? Because this is a card I've never played with or against, and I still haven't really figured it out. It's called Pit Keeper.
So this is 1 and a black, 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, if you have 4 more creatures in your graveyard, you get to return 1 from your graveyard to your hand.
So it becomes a Gravedigger if you have 4, but it only costs 2. That just seems weird to me.
It's
right?
not a good card.
Okay.
And it's unfortunate because like it looks somewhat appealing, but it just doesn't really work. And the fact that it costs 2 mana doesn't help because you're never playing it earlier.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a 2 mana card that you don't want to play till turn 9. So the card's just bad. Like having played with it in Time Spiral Block and having seen what games will look like in Modern Masters, it's just not a good card.
Okay. That's what I was kind of hoping you were going to say.
Too often is the problem.
Yeah, for sure. 4 cards or 4 creatures in your graveyard is a lot. That is not easy to do. Yeah. Druid's Deliverance, 1 and a green instant. It's a fog. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you this turn. By the way, it's not truly a fog, which prevents just all combat damage. And then it also has Populate. It just feels like they were like reaching a little bit here, looking for any card with Populate on it or something.
Yeah, this card is this pack is just very, very bad.
Yeah, this pack sucks. Talon Trooper. 1 blue-white for a 2/3 with flying. Now we were just talking with Gabriel there about these type of cards, and this is sort of the version of that for Modern Masters, right? It's like in a regular set you'd be like, oh cool, but here like Talon Trooper, a 2/3 flying for 3 is kind of the boring, doesn't really do enough for you type card. Have you found this card to hold its own or not? Because I always have it in my deck and then cut it because I have something that does more stuff.
I've played it in both the blue-white blink decks I've drafted so far.
Okay. Yeah.
I like it for a couple reasons. One is that it feels like a little heavier on the 4 drops than I would like. And this is like a decent statted 3. Also, like, it's good with Tandem Lookout, the 2/1 Soul Bond, you draw a card and you hit your opponent. Mm-hmm. So I've liked it. It also just helps you pressure because when you have Core Hookmasters and Mist Ravens, you do want to actually attack your opponent. You can't just bounce their creatures and expect a profit. You actually need to be pressuring them. And yeah, I think that it does a good job of that. So I haven't cut it so far, but I wouldn't take it very early.
Okay. This card I like a lot. Penumbra Spider. This is the 2/GG 2/4 with reach. And when it dies, it basically, you get a token of itself. So it's just incredibly difficult to deal with for the opponent. And it blocks really nicely, really well. And it has, like John used to call it keyword crappy, which is like a creature that you just don't care about. Like you just don't mind throwing it in front of another creature and being like, hey, if you got a trick, no problem. Now, Penumbra Spider doesn't have that because it's a good card, but it does have that. It gives you that reckless feel, right? Where you're just like, whatever, throw it in a block. I don't care if you have a combat trick or removal spell. Doesn't matter to me. Because if my Penumbra Spider dies, I'm fine with that. I get my card back anyway.
Yeah, there's really... Well, I'm not going to say no good way to answer Penumbra Spider because this set actually has a lot, but when you have no way to bounce or tap down the spider and your opponent plays it, you could have like a removal spell in your hand and it just feels like the worst thing ever because it's so much stats.
Yeah. Good against the flyer decks too, because it has reach obviously, but also because a lot of the flyers have a relatively low toughness and can't get through it. Simic Guildgate.
I think I was picking the Guildgates a little too high the first couple drafts. I would certainly never first pick one. They're fine because you can be 3 colors, but you're not prioritizing them.
Right. Well, I am. You think that you were taking them too highly?
Yeah, initially I ended up with like 6 or 7. I'm like, I actually don't need this many. So I think you want like 4 or 5 in a normal, like, 2 in a splash deck.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. I've been playing 4 to 5 color decks, so it's been a little different for me. Grizzly Spectacle. This is 2 black for an instant. Destroy target non-artifact creature. Its controller puts a number of cards equal to that creature's power from the top of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So it's just 2 black instant to kill a creature, and then there's like an incidental mill effect as well.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, 4 mana to kill a creature is not exciting in a set like this. The mill part's mostly irrelevant. You're not going to mill them out very often, so it's just a playable. I haven't been like overly impressed by it.
I know. I keep not really knowing where to take it. Uncommons. Orzhov Signet.
Oh yeah, here we go.
That's a business.
I'm happy first picking most of the signets, especially the like Esper colored ones, because those are the colors that, or any of the blue ones, because those are the ones that the acceleration is so much more useful. Whereas like Gruul Signet is a lot less exciting because the red-green deck, or like Celestia Signet, because those decks seem like they want to curve out more. But yeah, Orzhov Signet's a great first pick. Like, I actually would be very happy with that.
Yeah, I like those too. Goblin Assault. Have you played against this yet? It's 2 in a red enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get a 1/1 Goblin token, and Goblin creatures have to attack each turn of Fable.
It's pretty bad. Like, I think that if you're ahead, the card gives you far ahead. Like, if you can play it, kill their blocker, get a 1/1 next turn, kill their blocker, you have like 3 1/1s attacking the turn after. Sure.
Yeah, that's asking a lot though, huh?
In general, they just play a 2/2 and it blanks your Goblin Assault.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think it's not great either. Savage Lands.
This is the red, black, green tri-land. I like signets a lot more than the tri-lands.
Do you really? So I need you to explain that, because I actually had this pick in one of my drafts. It wasn't this tri-land, but it was an on-color, an on-shard tri-land, or an on, a signet that was 2 of my colors, and in fact, the color that I needed.
So the reason I like the signets more is that they accelerate you, and also the fact that you can get Guildgates fairly easily, from what I've seen, means that tri-lands are competing with those for your tap land spaces. Like, you don't want 12 tap lands in your deck or 10 tap lands in your deck. I don't know. I just like the acceleration of signets. Being able to play a 4-drop on turn 3 is just a pretty big game. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the counter argument is that, these lands, they're draft picks that you actually get to play. Because, I mean, I've been flooded with playables every time I've played this set,
that is definitely true.
And they're so powerful to have all 3 colors in one card. I don't know which is better. Because obviously, like, the signets have a bigger impact on the game by ramping you and fixing your mana. But there's that opportunity cost thing. I don't really know how to parse that.
It's going to depend on what your deck ends up looking like. But in general, I think I'd rather have a signet than a tri-land.
Okay. Ooh, we got a nice rare here, buddy. Actually, I should say mythic rare. Oh, somebody's going to be happy with this one. We got a Snapcaster Mage.
Oh, yeah, I would first pick Snapcaster Mage. And not just because it's valuable, because like you could just draft some removal spells and the card is great. So,
this is a nice one.
Sounds great to me.
Yeah, this is good. We do have a foil, of course. It's Strength in Numbers, 1 and a green for an instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets against trample and +X/+X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. Whatever. We're not taking that over Snappy.
Oh, no.
Snapcaster is the best card in the pack. It is, right?
Yes, I think it is the best card in the pack. Though Orzhov Signet is my second pick.
Okay. Yeah, I like these picks. And by the way, I'll be giving in fact, what we'll do is I give away all the rares to a lucky patron. As long as you're on the Patreon, you're eligible for it. So that's going to go in here. There's also a Craterhoof Behemoth that we opened last time, and a Path to Exile, a Walking Ballista. This is actually a nice one. This also has some of the old cards that we've opened, a Deep Spawn, the Power Matrix that I think it stumped Owen, but you got or something. I can't remember now. Anyway, now it's got a Snapcaster Mage in it, and it's going to have the rares from our Crack-a-Draft. So that one's definitely ready to be sent off. And I will be sending that off. But Snapcaster Mage it is, for multiple reasons. Okay, let's do a Crack-a-Draft now. So this is where Luis and I take our seat at the draft table and then walk you through not just pack one, pick one like we do on a normal Crack-a-Pack, but also we continue to walk you through multiple picks and even try to make some guesses as to what the people around us may or may not be drafting as we work our way through. So this is Aether Revolt, and we're pretending that we're sitting pack one, pick one at, let's say, a Grand Prix day 2. So a situation where we're incentivized to do as well as we can. This one comes from Jen. Thank you, Jen. right. I'm going to go pretty quickly on these ones. Aether Revolt has been out for quite a while now. And we don't want to leave anybody behind, but also this is a lot of packs to get through. So I'm just going to read the name of the card, and hopefully you guys are caught up enough to remember what they all do. All right, so we've got Precise Strike. No. Nope. Aether Swooper, maybe.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Yeah. Alley Evasion, no. Lifecraft Cavalry? Swooper's better than that.
I like Swooper more for sure.
I do too. Fenhauler, no. Natural Obsolescence, no. Aether Inspector, no. Implement of Ferocity, that's a nice one.
I would still take Aether Swooper.
I think I would too. Implement of Examination, no. Reservoir Walker, Thragtusk with Energy Sub-Theme.
I don't get the love for that exactly, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, it's perhaps not quite as good as Thragtusk. All right, here's a card. Rogue Refiner.
Okay. I would start by taking Aether Swooper over Rogue Refiner. I think that Rogue Refiner is not enough better than a monocolor card, or this monocolor card, to justify going into two colors.
Yeah, I feel that way too, but it's close. How about Fatal Push?
I like Fatal Push.
Now, yeah.
Yeah, I would take Fatal Push over Aether Swooper.
I think I would.
It's not as good as it isn't constructed, but it's still good.
Yeah, I think so too. Pima Aether Seer, that's the 4-mana 3/2 that you get energy equal to the highest power among creatures you control, and you can pay 3 energy to force a creature to block.
Fatal Push certainly better than that.
Definitely. All right, now this is good pack. Battle at the Bridge is our rare. That's the X black sorcery with Improvise, and target creature gets -X until end of turn, and you gain X life.
I would take Battle at the Bridge over Fatal Push. The fact that the Improvise is nice, but even just the fact that you just drain one of their big creatures late is very good. So Battle at the Bridge is what I'm going to be taking out of this pack.
I would take it too.
A foil or something.
Yeah, no, there's no foil. So we take Battle at the Bridge. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to be the player to our right. You need to name the player to our right.
Name the player to your right.
Yeah, just give them a name. Doesn't matter what.
Huey.
Okay, Huey is picking a card from the pack, and Huey just took that one because that's a pretty nice one. And Huey shuffles up the pack and passes it to us. All right, so here's what we have. Remember, Battle at the Bridge is our first pick. Ravenous Intruder, that's the ATOG. No.
Yeah, not a fan.
Consulate Turret, absolutely not. Night Market Guard, no. All right, here's one. Aether Poisoner. That's a nice little follow-up.
Yeah, it's a good black card, just a solid common. So Aether Poisoner is certainly in the lead right now.
For sure. Negate, no. Nope. Mobile Garrison, no. Decommission, or Decommish, as the ORAC calls it, no.
Yeah.
Embrawl Gear Smasher, nope. Defiant Salvager, And remember, I'm comparing these now to Aether Poisoner, by the way. So you've got to knock Poisoner off the pedestal here. Prey Upon? No.
No, I don't really love the card, and Poisoner is also the same color as your first pick.
Right, and that's going to be the hard part to overcome here. Leave in the Dust, another fine card, but again, Poisoner is just better. Shielded Aether Thief, I like it, but no, Aether Poisoner still. Oh, well, all right. We do have a little run for the money here. Pacification Array is our last card.
Oh, I would take Pacification Array. So the rare is missing.
The rare is missing. Huey must have sniped the rare. That old dirty
Pacification
dog.
Array is a great pick here because first of all, it's I think better than Aether Poisoner. Second, it's colorless, which means, and not only is it colorless, it improvises for Battle at the Bridge, and Battle at the Bridge is splashable, so you could easily just splash it in some other deck, or you can just go a different direction if the next two picks are Renegade Wheelsmiths or something like that. So
sure.
I would Pacification Array.
Okay.
And the fact that Huey took a rare means you don't get a ton of information.
Right. Exactly.
It's a good rare, though, because Pacification is pretty good.
Yeah, and Huey's pretty good at Magic, too, I'm told. By the way, that pack came from James. Thank you, James. From GP New Jersey. Appreciate that. So now, let's see how this works.
If all these packs were sent in by someone, they should be the people in the draft.
Yeah, the problem is that they overlap a bit, but I'm down for that.
So we got passed to by James.
Yeah, we got passed to by James, and then to James's right is Alex Sciano. So thank you, Alex, for the pack. We do appreciate it. But again, Alex is taking his time. He's looking at what ultimately is a damn good pack. And Alex doesn't really like this color, so he's going to take this. this comes to the Husifer, and Huey, or not Huey, this is James. Sorry about that. And he's going to take this one. And that leaves us with this pack. All right. So this pack has now come to us. And the first card out, wow, this pack actually looks great. Chandra's Revolution.
Okay. A playable removal spell, so I would be,
it's in the lead by default, but it actually, is a
it's a card I could see taking. It's a good third pick.
Yeah. Shipwreck Moray. No. Audacious Infiltrator. Black white. I don't know.
True Name Nemesis.
Yeah. Protection from nothing really. I still like the Chandra's Revolution here myself.
Same.
Fenhauler, no. Even though it's black, and even though there's an improvised card, I don't like Fenhauler. I don't think it's that
really.
Good.
I think Fenhauler's good.
Okay, I think Chandra's Revolution is even being off color significantly better.
I would take Chandra's Revolution over Fenhauler in this situation, but Fenhauler's a card I would want in my deck most of the time. So
okay, Silkweaver Elite, no. Mobile Garrison, no. Consulate Turret again, no. Night Market Guard again, no. But you know what that means? Ether Poisoner. Hello.
Okay.
I would take Ether Poisoner here. Battle of the Bridge, Pacification Array, and then adding an Ether Poisoner seems really good to me. Do you like it over Chandra's Revolution?
I would take Ether Poisoner here over Chandra's Revolution and Fenhauler.
Implement of Improvement, that's the white one. No. Wow, another Rogue Refiner.
Yeah, whoever first picks the Rogue Refiner is going to have, or third picks or whatever, is going to have a pretty good time.
No kidding. All right. Yeah, these packs have just been sweet. We got a real challenge here. Tezzeret's Touch.
Okay, so we
can totally take this card. Yeah,
enchantment that makes an artifact into a 5/5, and then when the artifact dies, you get it back. I would take Tezzeret's Touch here. So getting a Tezzeret's Touch third pick is a decent sign. I mean, obviously, no one really wants to commit too early to that, but it's a decent sign. And James and I don't remember who the second person was, Alex, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Both know they've passed a Tezzeret's Touch, which has some amount of meaning. So it's high upside. It is actually a really high upside card. So I would take Tezzeret's Touch over Ether Poisoner here.
Okay, and then I've got one more seat, and this one is actually occupied by two people, Andrew and Jesse, the Steel Arcanists. they wrote that on the pack from GP New Jersey. Thank you, Andrew and Jesse. We do appreciate it, and I like that you named yourselves. It's pretty gas. All right, and I'm just sort of working my way through here. I think they'd probably take this one, I think. And then what does Huey want? Looks like a pretty good pick for Huey. What would Huey do? He would take this one. Okay, and that leaves us. So which one did we pick? Tezzeret's Touch, or did we just stay safe and take the Poisoner?
No, I'm taking Tezzeret's Touch.
Yeah, I like that too. Let's go for it, right? Okay, so when this pack comes to us, it's got Metallic Rebuke. Not unreasonable here.
No, but not a card I'm excited about.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. It fits. Lifecraft Cavalry. No. Emerald Gear Smasher. No. Natural Obsolescence. No. Resourceful Return. No. Verdant Automaton. Countless Gears Renegade. All right, this is getting a little awkward. Watchful Automaton. Don't make me do this. Augmenting Automaton. Has to be the pick, right?
Yeah, I would take Augmenting Automaton. It's the black one here.
Yeah, it's the black one. I think it's bad.
It's what you want in an improvised deck.
It is.
It's what you have an improvised card in Tezzeret's Touch.
Yeah, it works perfect in our deck.
This is the deck that will want Fenhauler and Bastion Inventor.
Yeah, totally. And Augmenting Automaton is a big piece of that. So I think that's definitely the pick at this point. Now, we do get a little bit of interest here. We've got a Shielded Ether Thief, which is a pretty powerful card, but really just doesn't fit in this theme at all. I would still just take the Automaton myself.
I would take Automaton too. I do like the Ether Thief, but Automaton is good.
Yeah. And then our rare, there is still a rare in here, is Spire of Industry.
Oh, fine card, but I think that I would rather just have the Automaton here, even though I do like splashing.
Yeah. I like this too. So that's where we ended up. So we've got Battle at the Bridge, Pacification Array, Tezzeret's Touch, Augmenting Automaton in that order. And of course, Luis and I would be looking to draft this blue-black artifacts deck. It usually has an improvised theme going along with it and just rewards you in general for having a lot of artifacts in your deck. So I think that's pretty cool. And then if you want to know what the people to our right ended up with. The artist formerly known as Huey, which was, who was it? James. First picked Quicksmith Rebel.
Okay, the red one.
Yeah, the red rebel. Then got past Solemn Recruit, so took that.
Yeah.
And then took a Dawn-Feathered Eagle.
White seemed very cut. That was, I think, pretty clear. Green also didn't seem particularly open.
Mm-hmm. Agreed, yeah. And that was a Dawn-Feathered Eagle was the third pick there for James. Alex was the person to their right. Now, we don't have as much information, of course, because I only took just the one card, or the two cards in this case. First picked Malfist Revolutionary over the Solemn Recruit. I don't know, just figured that Alex was all about it. And then second picked Windkin Raiders rather than the Dawn-Feathered Eagle or anything else. And then the two on the end, Andrew and Jesse, they first picked a Hungry Flames out of their pack.
So we're pretty well set up for blue-black improvise here.
Yeah, if you look at it like what I'm looking at here, we've got blue and black, and then to our right, the player to our right is drafting, at least currently, red-white. Then the player to their right is on green-blue. So a little bit of blue might go away there. And then just a red card for the other player. So yeah, I think that like we're actually in a pretty good spot. And this is I think the lesson that you can take from this, is when it comes to reading signals, Luis and I always try to remind you not to put too much emphasis on any one signal, but that signals do matter. And we did get a third pick Tezzeret's Touch. And as you can see, that matters here, right? The person didn't first pick it. They ended up in blue-green, at least as of now. And the next person to the left is in red-white, and they had no interest in it whatsoever. And so we snatched it up because it's the most powerful card in that pack. And now we might be the ones who get to benefit from that knowledge and from that skill of reading the table and end up with a really sweet blue-black deck, with a lot of improvise and artifact synergies and stuff.
Yeah, I have high hopes for how this draft would go. I think based on the first couple picks and what seems to be open.
Totally. I think we're drafting like geniuses here, and we're probably going to dominate this draft. All right, I'm going to put all these rares in the pile as well. And like I said, next week I'll give these away to a random supporter from Patreon. Any amount too. Doesn't matter where you're at. And we got some nice stuff in this one actually. And then of course we'll get the ball.
Am I eligible?
You are not. The only reason is because you don't support the show on patreon.com/limited-resources.
Nor do I have access to it.
No, but if you did, you would. And now you know. All right, so let's move on to our kind of pair of main topics here. We've got a couple of interesting things to talk about on the show this week. The first one is one that I wanted to touch on because this pops up somewhat frequently. Luis and I are both big advocates for playing on Magic Online for people who want to try to improve at Magic. It's just the best way to get in a lot of reps and to understand the rules in a more granular and focused way rather than, shortcuts in the things that we have to do in live play. And I think that it translates back very nicely to live play as well. I also was thinking the other day of the high level Magic pros and who plays on Magic Online and who doesn't out of them. And there is a precious few handful that don't play regularly on Magic Online. There are some. It's not impossible. But if you just go down the line, it's going to be like, yep, no, no, like that. It's just, 80% or something of the platinums and the regular gold level pros play on Magic Online regularly and often. And, you have to really, if you want to reach to that highest level of the game. Now, for you, the listener, maybe that isn't your goal. Maybe you're not trying to be a platinum Magic pro, but you certainly are trying to level up your game, get that win percentage up on Magic Online, start paying for your hobby, rather than having it be a drain on your extra money. And Magic Online is a fantastic way to get your skill level up. But it's not easy. Magic Online is kind of a stubborn and unforgiving program in many ways. And it's also daunting. It's just got a lot going on, both from an interface perspective, but also just from an offerings perspective. And that means that a lot of people are just hesitant to get into it. And so they'll send us emails sometimes or tweets and say, I want to try out Magic Online, but I just don't really know where to start. I don't know what to do. How does this actually work? What are the underpinnings of this thing? So we're going to take a little bit here to just sort of touch on that and give you an idea of what some of the offerings are right now on Magic Online and what you should go for based on kind of your skill level and where you're at with that kind of stuff. So Luis, you want to jump in here and start talking us through what you found?
Sure. The first thing I did when trying to figure out, I guess, expected value of the different events is look up an expected value calculator. This was the one at GoatBots. You can we're going to put the link in there.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the show notes. Yep.
And you can type in your win percentage, and it'll tell you which events are the best expected value. So this is like the amount of value you can expect to get if you play in this event, and and for the limited events it actually counts cards, so it kind of assumes you're rare drafting.
Okay.
So it looks like and I just put in 55 win percentage, but you could toggle that. I checked it for like most numbers above, at or above 50, and it seems like this was the order that they would go in anyway. So it doesn't seem like your win percentage changes which events are the best, though obviously a higher win percentage means you get more value. For limited, like the sealed friendly leagues are the best value. And then the draft is basically all negative value, which lines up with what I assumed going in. Drafting is fun. We both do a lot of draft, but it is, I think, unless you have a very high win percentage, it tends to be a loss of value. Like you're paying for the experience, which I think is fine. I mean, that is part of like when you go to a draft, you tend to pay for it.
Yeah, well, and one of the philosophical things I think to consider with this is not putting it in a black and white sense of being like, well, it's negative value or it's positive value, because that makes it sound like it's good or it's bad. The goal here is to get that per draft cost down as low as you can, right? That's what you're looking for. I mean, if you could draft for $1 per draft, you would be like, sure, I'll draft every day, all day. Like, who cares, right? And because if you're a Magic player, you certainly have $1 that you can afford for that. Where if it's costing you the full amount, right? Let's just say you O3 every draft and you never open a good rare and you're just paying like $14 a draft or whatever. Well, that would limit pretty significantly the number of drafts that you'd be willing to do in a week or a month or whatever. And your goal is to get that opening dollar amount down as close to zero as possible. Maybe even, if you get really good and you're really selective and manage your collection, you can make a little bit at it. But that, like Louis said, that does take a pretty extraordinarily high win rate when it comes to booster drafts. But still, there are stages here that you can work your way through to try to get these as cheap as possible.
So if you're not in the mood for sealed and you want to fund your drafts, which is, again, I know a lot of people operate when it comes to Magic Online, Constructed's pretty good. The competitive leagues for basically any format have good expected value, and followed by Vintage Daily, which I'm a fan of. One of the reasons I actually like recommending Constructed is that you can buy into Constructed, and then you tend not to have to spend a lot of money upkeeping that. And one way to do that is to play like formats that don't rotate. So Modern changes less frequently than Standard. Yes, when cards get banned, some decks fall out of favor, and you could end up, in a kind of tough spot if for example, you like Scape Shift or whatever, and then Primeval Titan got banned, just pulling things out of thin air. That card is not getting banned. But then you could be in trouble, right? Like, or you like Ad Nauseam and that card gets banned. But for the most part, if you have a competitive Modern deck, like you could have played Affinity without spending a whole lot to update it for like 4 years, and it would have been fine.
Yes.
Like you would have had to spend $10 a year or something.
And you'd be a hell of an Affinity player by that time too, wouldn't you?
Yes, that's the other thing, is that one of the ways I think people get a lot better is if you have the same deck and you play it a lot and you get to play it a lot. That's a feature that you don't find in Standard, for example. If you pick up Mardu Vehicles and play it right now in Standard, you get to play it and you can get good at it, but like you'll play it for a couple months. You can't play it for years. You can't even play it for 3 months, really. It's not that long until the next set comes out. So I would say, unless you specifically have Standard deck formats or a Standard tournament you want to prepare for, or you really like Standard, play whatever format you want. But if you're just like, I want to play a Constructed format and I don't want to spend a lot, like there is value in buying into the older formats. Pauper actually is one I like. There's only friendly leagues for Pauper, which have slightly lower expected value than competitive leagues, but you can also get a Pauper deck for like $20, or $30 or whatever. So that is a nice feature of the format. Though some of the decks are a little more expensive because, random things like Pyroblasts or 7 tickets or whatever.
Right.
But I think that the way that a lot of players built their Magic Online collections, myself included, was to buy into a constructed deck. Funnily enough, it was actually Affinity back when it was in Standard, but and just play a lot of constructed, because Magic is fun and constructed, I think, is pretty fun. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on this podcast, but it is.
It flies.
And that can help fund your drafts very easily. Sealed can too, apparently. I didn't know Sealed was a positive expected value. That actually did surprise me. So if you're a fan of Sealed, you can play those as well. And those are like the ways that you can basically play Magic Online without having to spend too much, or with like making, a profit. Look, neither of us are saying like it's better to do this than to work. Like this is how you should make money, but it's the sort of thing where like, yeah, if you can spend time, playing with your hobby and end up at the end of it with like a bunch of packs, like that's nice, right?
Yeah, it is. And like I said, a lot of time the goal, and for a lot of our listeners, we've had a lot of listeners over the years show us their spreadsheets and those type of things. I remember Zach Zvazda, he showed us once, and, you really can work that per draft cost down quite low as your win percentage goes up. Also, if what you're really interested in doing is continuing just to play, limited drafts specifically or whatever, selling your rares is a big part of the economy on Magic Online. And if you're the type of person that has more time than money, which is, a lot of us find ourselves in that spot, you can take your time and get the small edges worked out as well. So some things that you might want to consider, when it comes to rare drafting, set yourself a ticket threshold, where if there's a card that is above a certain number of tickets, that you will just take it no matter what. And sell it to get the tickets back. Tickets, of course, are basically dollars on Magic Online. And you can look these up in the trade section on Magic Online and just type in the card, or you can go, like I like using MTGOtraders.com. They're just sort of the go-to site that I've used for a long time, and that they're always really reliable. So they have a search field, and you can see the price that they offer, their buy list price, or what they're selling it for on like any of the sets, any of the versions, anything. And you'll find that there too, to give you a ballpark. Now, every site varies what they might pay for a card. So you just want to use one, like I said, I use MTGO Traders just like as a ballpark figure. And then, you want to find your favorite bots or people to sell to, or you can even put up your own classified for your own card, and you'll get a little bit more. And these are just ways that you can just grind out the smaller edges. And as your play skill improves and as your priorities change, you can adjust it. For example, if you are really hard up for money and just trying to get as much drafts as possible, then you might want to set that ticket threshold relatively low, 2 tickets or 1.5 or something like that, where you're just taking it and just booking that as part of your experience. But as you care more about improving at draft, that number might go higher, where you might say, look, I'm willing to give up a 5-ticket card here because I need to take this other really good card for my deck, and I want to see how this deck does or how this card performs, and I want to try to, run it up in the draft here. And you might just be like, it's worth $5 for me to pick up this card. Because remember, if you pick up a card that helps you win, that also counts as some amount of money, basically. Your deck improves by a couple of percentage points. Your equity improves by that much as well. So even though it probably isn't going to be a $5 increment off of one card that you don't always get to draw, blah, 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 blah. You are getting a little bit of that back. But you can adjust that. It's just up to you. If you have just more, so much money that you don't care anymore, then whatever, you can pass. I mean, somebody passed me a foil Scalding Tarn today in Modern Masters.
Wow.
I'm like, what? Like second pick. I'm just like, why is this here? Like, this just doesn't make any sense. It's like an 18-ticket card or something. I'm just like, this is just dumb. I just took it. I was like, yeah, I need the mana fixing. Sure. And I took it. But
I passed a foil Thoughtseize when I was testing for the PT once, because I just wanted to just draft the best deck I could. That was better practice. And my teammates actually yelled at me for that, but I was just like, whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, again, like it's all about personal priorities, and you had yours. I mean, you don't get that many drafts before the Pro Tour. So you did what you had to do. So keep those little things in mind as well, because it is a holistic approach to this, to make your drafts as cheap as possible. It's not just about win rate or picking the right queue. It's also about curating and managing your collection. Now, I'm a bit hypocritical with this, and I know, Luis, you're the same as me. I'm very lazy about managing my actual personal collection. So, like, I'll probably have that Scalding Tarn in there in 10 years and just, like, I just haven't used it or whatever, and I'm just dumb, and it'll have been released so many times it'll be worth like a ticket or something, and I'll just have missed the boat. But again, it's all about priorities and where your time versus your money equation lies. But I know a lot of people that really manage their collection tightly, even down to like selling bulk commons off, for percentages of tickets over time. And that way, again, they can just constantly keep that per ticket draft price down as low as possible. The other thing that you can do, I mentioned this on the show, I believe last week, but I should mention it again, is that remember, it's not just playing in actual sanctioned leagues and queues that you can play Magic Online. If you have a group of people like, say, other limited resources listeners available to you can, all of your draft decks are automatically saved. All your sealed decks are automatically saved. Don't be afraid to grab one of those. Challenge a buddy. You can be in the limited resources clan. It makes it marginally easier to find people, though. I'll be honest. The clan functionality is at a kind of an all-time low right now, so it doesn't do a whole lot. But you can set these things up on the LR subreddit, or you can start a chat room every day on Magic Online by typing, # and then the name of your chat room. And if you post that on a forum where there's other listeners, then they can enter your chat room on Magic Online and challenge each other and do that kind of stuff. And you can play for free. That is a really good way to stretch out your value on a draft. I mean, you're going to get sick of the deck at some point, but if you really feel like you haven't gotten a chance to play it or figure out what the archetype is doing, and you're going to find other people in our community that are going to want to play against you, and you can do that too. So keep that in mind. It's just another small way that you can squeeze a little bit more value out of each of your drafts.
Yeah. And again, I know that you and I aren't particularly good at doing this stuff, but it's stuff that I used to do. And I think that stuff that you used to do,
yes,
it is the sort of thing that can extend how often you get to play. And I think that is valuable.
Yes, that is. And I mean, we're also fans of value here. You don't want to spew off too much. Okay. And again, just to recap, really, I do highly, highly recommend trying out Magic Online if your goal is to improve. It takes some getting used to. It's not perfect. It definitely has its warts, but my God, there is just no other way to get good at Magic like playing on Magic Online. And the utter convenience of being able to draft when you want, it's too good. It really is. It's just too good. I love it. I play every day. Like, I love Magic Online. And look, again, this isn't me saying it's a perfect program, but it is. I love it. I play it every single day. I like doing it more than, than watching TV or anything like that. It's just sort of the way that I unwind.
The reason I don't watch TV really is that the bar for me to watch a show over just like do a draft is very high. And so some shows eclipse that bar. Very few end up doing so.
Yeah, exactly. Because drafting is sweet. Okay. Another thing that we want to talk about on this episode of the show is to get into a little bit of the nitty gritty here on the phases and steps of Magic. Okay. And this is something that is going to be perhaps a little bit dry because it is, but it's also something that if you ever go to a live tournament and you play against people, especially people that don't often play on Magic Online, you will find huge gaps in their knowledge about how things actually work and what the underpinnings to the game is as far as moving from one step to the other. And we thought we would also layer on some strategic stuff too, saying when you might want to do things and why you would do them at certain points and steps in the game. So we're going to just walk through them one at a time and sort of talk about, well, this is a good time to do these things for these reasons, and this is how this phase or step works. One of the things that we have to start off with, though, is the untap step. In the untap step is just something that happens in Magic, and there's you don't get to do things during it, right? There's no such thing as during your untap step, you can cast a spell. Nothing can go on the stack. Nothing happens there. So that one, if you ever hear somebody say on your untap, I'm going to, they can't. Your permanents just untap as normal, barring anything that prevents them from doing so. And then you immediately are out of your untap step with no chance for either player to act in there at all. And that brings us to our first real phase and or step, which is, of course, the upkeep. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the upkeep, Luis?
So the upkeep step, so how I actually broke these all down is what are you going to do during your own upkeep and what are you going to do during your opponent's? So the upkeep is essentially a step before you draw and before you go to your main phase that sometimes triggers happen, but most of the time nothing happens.
Yeah. You know what it really is when I think about it? If you reverse engineer what the upkeep step is, it's just the beginning of your turn. It's the first time that something is allowed to actually, a game action is allowed to happen on your turn, but it's also before any of the necessary game actions have taken place, like drawing a card mainly.
Yeah, it was, I think, there because a lot of drawback cards had upkeeps you had to pay for before you started your turn.
There you go. Yeah.
But that's just not really as much of a thing anymore.
No, but it still is a time for things to happen before, like, you have the knowledge about your card and before you've played anything else.
Yeah. So there's very little reason for you to play cards during your own upkeep, just because you can just go to your draw and have more information.
Right.
The one thing that actually does come up in this format is you'll crack Renegade Map if you want to thin your deck of land, but also have Revolt on during your turn. So that's a reason to upkeep, sack Renegade Map.
Yeah, it is incredibly rare that you hear the sentence, I have an effect on my upkeep.
Yes.
there's like you said, there's just almost no upside to just waiting at least until the draw step to see what you've drawn for the turn.
So
hold on. I thought of one other time when it does pop up occasionally, which is, you will sometimes cast a spell in your upkeep if you have a triggered ability on your upkeep that hurts you in some way. Like, let's say you have a card that says you lose 1 life at the beginning of your upkeep.
Sure, you might cast
a spell. Yeah. So that does pop up occasionally too. But the thing is that you're mainly responding to that trigger. You're not just like, saying in my upkeep, I'm going to do that. And by the way, I did want to mention that shortcut because you're going to hear this for upkeep and draw step and a few other things, which is most people in real life will say in or during my upkeep, I want to do something, or your upkeep or whatever. And that's because the way that these things work is the beginning of upkeep happens without you being able to do anything. And any triggers that happen at the beginning of upkeep will go on the stack as a result. And then you're in your or their upkeep. And that's where you actually have priority and can cast spells at some point there too. So that's kind of the way that people verbalize that.
So during your opponent's upkeep, this actually is something that you probably could use. Most people should use more often than they do. Basically, you want to either play removal or a spell that you think they might like counter. And the reason you want to play it during their upkeep is if they had all their mana untapped during your turn, you're better off playing it during their upkeep, just saying go and playing it during their upkeep, because that way if they do have a response, they're out that mana on your turn. Like, you imagine that they have 4 mana up and you're like, okay, kill one of your things, and they're like, pay 3 mana, cancel it. Then they untap, take their turn. If you did it during their upkeep, they'd be down those 3 mana. So the most frequent use of upkeep is playing spells during your opponent's upkeep.
That's right. And the key here being that the upkeep is before the draw step. So you're playing things before they get a chance to draw their card for the turn, and forcing them to react to it, but while it's still on their turn. And like Louis said, that's a good way to tie up some of their mana. When you think about it, as long as their mana situation is the same, it's kind of a free roll, right? Yeah. I mean, there's just so few times that you get punished for doing that. I can't even think of any off the top of my head. So yeah, I agree. And I think people don't do that quite enough. They usually just do it on their own turn, which is interesting because we actually preach that as well, that like there are many times when you want to just cast a removal spell on your own turn to make sure that the creature dies. But the whole point of that is that, that they can't protect it, because in limited, it ends up being usually 2 different types of cards that can interact. One of them is a card that nullifies your removal spell in some way. Like, let's say you point a burn spell at a creature and they have a pump spell, and the other is a counter spell of some sort. And so you really need to understand what it is that your opponent's doing, because if you are playing red for your removal and your opponent, and let's say it's an instant speed burn spell, and your opponent has a creature that you need to kill, but they're playing, green red or whatever, the only way they're really getting out of that is by pumping their creature. And in that case, you probably are better off doing it on your turn, because if they use the pump spell, at least you're not taking the extra damage. Where if they are playing some type of counter spells, then what Louis suggested makes perfect sense, because you can tie up their mana.
Yeah, so after upkeep is draw step, and this is, again, in 99% of games, you draw your card and you continue on with your game, and there's no stop there. Basically, you're never going to stop during your own draw step.
I don't think I ever have.
Once I did. I drew my card for my turn. Had a wasteland in play, so you can sack it to destroy non-basic land.
Okay.
Realized I wanted to kill my opponent's land but not let them float mana into my main phase. So during my own draw step, I wastelanded.
Yes, and that will be the common exception, because of course one of the rules to Magic is that you can't float mana between steps and phases. So there are times when it's appropriate to a lot, like this actually does happen sometimes, right? Where there's some flurry of activity on somebody's upkeep, and then you say, okay, you've got 2 blue mana floating, and I still want to cast something before I get to my turn. I'll go to my draw step. And that's what you just described, right?
Yeah, and because I wanted to force them to, empty that mana before my actual main phase. But basically, you're never going to stop during your own draw step.
Yeah, it just never happens.
You can literally play Magic for 10 years and have it never happen.
Right.
During your opponent's draw step, you very rarely will have something like Vendilion Click or instant speed discard, because when your opponent draws for your turn, you want a chance to take that card out of their hand, but before they can play it. So again, for limited play, basically never happens. But sometimes they make cards that let you discard at instant speed. Not really anymore, because it's unpleasant.
Yeah, Kolaghan's command is the only real notable, right?
Right. You notice Implement of Malice doesn't do that. It's sorcery only. And the reason is if your opponent has no cards in hand, and then during their draw step you make them discard at instant speed, you can basically steal their turn.
It's so mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the only time you're really going to use your opponent's draw step. But again, you can mostly ignore this, but that is what that step is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because with the exception of those cards that you mentioned, the Vendilion Click and some of the instant speed draw, people don't even acknowledge it in real life Magic, right? They just draw their card.
Yes. Yeah. No one's really going to stop during their draw step.
Right.
But you can end up doing that if you have instant speed discard. But again, not very common, but it's good to know about. Next is main phase 1. So during your own main phase, you're going to play. This is where you play your sorcery speed stuff. If you're not going to attack, if you have like no attackers in play, you just play your cards here. Like you don't skip through your empty combat step. You just play your cards during your main phase. Mm-hmm. If you do have attackers, you generally do not want to tap out main phase. So you're going to, before attacking. So you're either going to play a land and like a haste card or a removal for one of their blockers, or like, so maybe a sorcery speed pump spell equipment or whatever. You'll play stuff that affects combat. Otherwise, you're going to attack before deciding what to commit to the board.
Yeah, and that is the common lines of play. Of course, there's strategic decisions on whether to play the land first or play it in the second, but that just depends.
Yeah, for the most part, you should just play it first. I often wait on lands, but sometimes that's burned to me, just because I'm used to doing it, even though you really should, most of the time, just play it there.
Yeah, that's what I usually just play it.
During your opponent's first main phase, you're basically never going to use that. There's not really a reason to play stuff during your opponent's first main phase. The main use would be like if they have something that triggers beginning of combat, like Weldfast Engineer or Toolcraft Exemplar, maybe you'll play something during their first main phase. But for the most part, this is just not a step that you're going to have a lot of actions in.
Right. And you do have to tell your opponent about your intentions to do that, because they'll often try to leave that main phase, and then you're going to need to react to it some way.
So after main phase comes beginning of combat. As for your own beginning of combat, let's just say you're not going to spend much time here.
This is a tough one, because this is a place where the rules on Magic Online and in real life actually do diverge a bit. I shouldn't say the rules. The way that the rules are interpreted and actually used diverge a bit, because on Magic Online, you can move to your beginning of combat step and then do anything you want during that, like you can any other step. But on given the shortcuts that we have to use in real life Magic to get from one phase to the next and to get through the game, there's sort of a shortcut that is combat, or I think it should be attackers if this is what you wanted to do. But anyway, the word is combat. And if you say combat, that does in fact mean that you're going to your declare attacker step, unless you specify that other things are going to happen before that, like combat, trigger my Weldfast Engineer, something like that. If you do not say anything other than combat, then as Luis pointed out, you actually have moved through your beginning of combat and right to your declare attackers, which is the one that's coming up. So, this is just one of those things that the judges, had to really think of a comprehensive rule that would make the most sense for the most players. And that's what they came up with. And it does make sense when you break it down. And this is why Luis advocated for crewing vehicles and doing your stuff in your first main phase before you go to attackers or before you go to combat.
Yeah. So during your own beginning of combat, you're not going to do a whole lot, especially in paper magic, as you described. During your opponent's beginning of combat, this is where you use the cards like Pacification Array or other tappers, like that'll tap one of their attackers. You also can use removal here. Most of the time you're not. You're going to want them to commit to their attackers before showing them you have removal. But if they have a card like Aether Swooper, right, that has an attack trigger, here's where you'd want to use a removal to stop it. Basically, beginning of combat is the time on your opponent's turn that you use to prevent their creatures from attacking.
Yep, that's exactly what it's for. And that does come up a lot, by the way.
Yeah, it is something that you're going to frequently use. After beginning of combat comes declare attackers. So the player who's attacking, the player whose turn it is, just chooses all their creatures that are going to attack, and then those creatures are attacking.
Yeah, so that happens in one action. I mean, right. The person can take their time on deciding which ones actually do, but there's no sense to the order at which they decide. It's just in the way it actually plays out is they select a certain number of attackers, and then they sort of, stamp of approval that, and then they're all immediately declared as attackers.
And so what the step is now everything's attacking, but now both players are going to have priority to play things before blockers are declared. So during your own declare attacker step, you're gonna cast instants to remove blockers. And one of the reasons to do it here is that, let's say you don't want to show your opponent that you have a removal spell until they've already committed to what they're tapping with their tapper, right? Like they might Pacification Array or 2/2 flyer instead of your 4/4 ground creature because they have a 5/5. Once they do that, you attack with the 4/4, and then you cast your instant speed removal on their 5/5 and hit them for 4. So
yep.
That's basically what you will use on your turn. During your opponent's turn, you're not going to frequently cast removal or pump spells before declaring blockers, but there are some reasons to do so. One is the main one is if you suspect your opponent has a counter spell. So they're attacking with a 4/4 and you have a 3/3. If you think they have a counter spell, it's actually good to cast your +3/+3 instant, and then if they counter it, you don't block, but if they don't counter it, you do block. The downside is if your opponent has a removal spell, you'd much rather block first. That way you at least don't take the damage from the attacker. But this is a step where you'll sometimes cast, a Giant Growth in that sense, or you'll do something like cast your removal spell to make sure it works, make sure they don't have a way to protect their creature, and then decide what to block. Because you don't want to be in a situation where, you're at 4, they're attacking with a 4/4 and a 3/3. You have a 4/4 and you're like, block your 3/3, try to kill your 4/4, they counter it and you die. You'd rather just try to kill your 4/4, they counter it. Okay, I guess I have to block your 4/4 and go to 1 from your 3/3.
Yeah, exactly. And, one of the keys here that we've talked about on the show, but I want to reiterate to people, is the order at which these things happen. Each of these times that you enter a new phase or step, the active player is the one who starts off with priority first. So they are the ones who may act. If they do anything, put anything on the stack, then of course their opponent has a chance to respond to those things. And then after the stack is emptied, priority falls back to the active player until they say, okay, I'm done. I want to pass priority to you. That's your last chance to do something before you're now in the next phase or step as the opposing player. What really is important here, though, is this declare attackers, declare blockers stuff, because this is, especially on the blockers one, the active player, meaning the player who's attacking, is the one who has to blink first. They're the ones who have to act in the way of like, I'm going to attack with all of my creatures. We're going to go to blocks. Okay. I won't block. Right. And that's fine. I just won't block at all. Then if the person has, for example, a pump spell that would make their attack lethal since their creatures weren't blocked, they have to just run it out there into all of your empty mana and put scary removal spell possibilities and all this type of stuff. They don't get to wait until you say, okay, I'm going to take damage, and then go, actually wait before that, which, by the way, I've seen multiple times at local card shops, is people who don't understand this. I don't think that they're trying to actively cheat. I just think that they don't know, and they want to make sure that the coast is clear before they cast their pump spell or their, whatever it is. And it does not work that way. You, as the active player, have to be the one to put that on the stack first, unless you pass priority to your opponent and then they do something that allows you to react to it. And that's really, really important. You should always remember that the active player is the one who has to go first, because that is a big disadvantage for the active player, and it's a big advantage for the defensive player, if you will. So that's something to keep in mind as well as we work our way through here.
So then we have declare blockers. Mm-hmm. So, and the first part of this is something people do not do a very good job of, by the way, in paper, which is ordering blockers.
Yeah, they never do. I always have to remind my opponent to do that before, because they'll be like block, double block, cast a spell. And I'm just like, easy, dude. Like, you haven't even ordered your blockers. I have priority before you get to do anything. Like, you're letting the cat out of the bag and you're not even, doing it right. So yeah, why don't you explain how that part works?
So if I attack you with a 4/4 and you block with a 2/2 and a 3/3, I have to choose before anything happens what the order of the blockers are, because I'll deal damage to the first thing first and then the second thing after that. So the reason it matters is, let's say in this example, if I suspect you have a +2/+2 spell, I'm going to put the 2/2 first and the 3/3 second. That way, even if you +2/+2 on the 2/2, I still get to kill it. Whereas normally you'd want to put the 3/3 first and the 2/2 second, so you kill the 3/3. Right. And so there's a lot of reasons why you don't order blockers in a different way. But remember, you have to order blockers before either player casts anything. So that's the first thing.
And it gets very awkward, by the way, if you don't. Because, like somebody goes, okay, I'll cast a spell. And then you're like, well, I didn't want that one to die first. And it just happens to be the order that they're sitting. It doesn't really mean anything. Usually a judge will be called, and the judge is going to have to look at it like, well, we're going to have to try to fix this. But you can avoid all of that by simply ordering the blockers if you're the one blocking, or if you're not, insist that your opponent does, because otherwise you don't even know how to act, accordingly, because you don't know which one's going to be taking damage first. So just say, I need you to order your blockers, and then we'll go on to the rest of the step here.
So blockers have been ordered. During your own declare blockers, you're the attacker. You have first priority. So you need to cast your combat tricks and use removal here before your opponent does anything. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the more intricate steps, because there's a lot of back and forth. There's a dance here where if you have a combat trick and you think they have a combat trick and you just like, okay, pass, and then they play their combat trick and then you play yours, sometimes that's better.
Yeah, you can blow them out. Yeah.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if you just say pass and they suspect it, sometimes they'll just say pass and then it'll just go straight to damage.
Mm-hmm. And then you have to live with however that block lined up, and you don't get to use your combat trick.
Right. So it's a disadvantage to go first because you have to commit to acting or passing before your opponent does. But when you're attacking, you're the one who goes first. So in a lot of combat steps, it's clear when someone needs to play something. They blocked a 2/2 with a 1/1. Clearly there's something going on there. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes you attack a 3/3 into a 3/3. You have a combat trick, but you're worried about removal, so you just pass. They then use removal on your unblocked 2/2. Then you just play a combat trick to win the fight of the 3/3s.
Yes.
So you do have to kind of weigh it. Like, obviously, if someone's tapped out, then it doesn't really matter, and then it's very easy. But a lot of times when both players have cards in hand, mana untapped, you have to decide when you're first whether you want to commit to something or hope your opponent does, or just be fine passing and assuming your opponent's going to pass.
Yeah, and this is a critical dance for limited, because creature combat comes up so much more often than limited.
This is way more relevant than limited.
Yeah, and one of the things that I should note, or we should note about what you just said, Luis, is that you should know that ahead of time. Right? Like, if you're going to attack your 3/3 into their 4/4, for example, or even if it's your 3/3 into their 2 like crappy 2/2s, right? You should know before you make that decision. Okay, if they double block, which is what I think they're going to do. Let's say it's my 3/3 that's pretty good against their 2 2/2s, and you've got a pump spell in your hand or whatever. And so if they double block, what are you going to do? Right? Are you going to be happy if you say, you know what? I'm not going to take the risk. I'll pass priority and see what they do. And they go, sure, pass. And then they trade off one of their 2/2s. You get to pick, but one of the 2/2s gets traded off for the 3/3. Are you okay with that? Is that an acceptable outcome? Because if it's not, you may not want to attack, right? And the same token, if you attack with your 3/3 and you've got your pump spell in your hand and they go double block with 5 open mana, it's all red and black. Are you comfortable being like, okay, I'll play my pump spell on my creature and just cross my fingers that you don't have a removal spell of some sort? Because if you're not okay with that, you may not want to make that attack. The best situations to be in are the ones where you get to kind of free roll your combat trick, meaning you attack and you line up what is at least a favorable trade for you. And then you can say, I pass priority, and you just don't care. If your opponent says pass, you're like, sure, that was a trade that I wanted to make anyway, no problem. Or if they act, now you get to sort of, break serve and be the one to act last in this scenario, which you normally wouldn't be, and you might be able to just blow them out anyway. So these are, this little subtle nuanced stance is a really, really important part specifically of Limited. It is a Magic-wide thing, but it comes up so much more often in Limited. And when you're around serious players because you'll hear them say those words, pass priority, a lot. And you're like, well, that's weird. Like, you don't really need to do that verbally, but in this case, you do. Especially in combat and especially in the declare blocker step, before you're going to go to damage, because that is a very specific sequence of actions and it matters a lot on how the game's going to play out and how you should play it. So think about those things ahead of time. Remember, as the attacker, you have to show your card first if you're going to do it. And that is a disadvantage. So be prepared to pass priority over in a lot of situations and live with the consequences if that happens.
Yeah. And be clear what's going on. I've seen a lot of I attack, my opponent blocks, and they go to play a spell. What they should do is wait for me to pass priority explicitly.
Yes.
And this is something that doesn't happen online, because online there's no debate at all, because you just have to click a button to pass priority. But make sure that when you're playing paper that you're being clear, because you can actually kind of be a little scummy if you're like looking at your opponent like, are you going to play something, but you haven't actually passed. Like, you're trying to get free information there.
This is the thing that experienced players will sometimes do to take advantage of inexperienced players if they're scummy. I do not like it. I think it's really bad. Yeah.
So if you're the opponent, it just switches. So it's kind of the same for both players here. It's just who has priority first.
Yes, but which is a big deal. It is
a big deal, but for the most part, like, your opponent's upkeep is drastically different than yours, whereas during the declare blocker step, it's pretty similar for both players.
It is, yes.
So you've gotten through declare blockers, both players have passed, then combat damage happens, which at this point, there's no more responding to. Damage does not go in the stack anymore. Mm-hmm. Damage is assigned. Normally, that's pretty straightforward. Your 4/4s trade, or your 3/3 got double blocked by 2/2s. You kill the one you ordered first, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sometimes which you do have to do, by the way.
Yes.
You are obliged to deal at least lethal damage to the first ordered blocker, and then
right.
You can deal
if
the rest
you have a 4/4 that got blocked by 2 2/2s, you can choose to assign all 4 damage to the first one.
Yes.
But you do have to assign at least, you have to assign at least 2 damage to the first one.
Yeah, which is interesting, by the way, because there are times when you actually want one of their creatures to stay alive.
Yeah, one of the things that frequent mistake people make is I attack you with a 5/5. You block with a 2/2 and a 1/1, and the 1/1 says, when I die, I give a creature -2/-2.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, 2/2 plus 1/1, and then when the 1/1 dies, give her a creature -2/-2. I can just choose to assign all the damage to your 2/2, not kill your 1/1. Yes. Then all of a sudden your double block doesn't work.
Exactly. So be aware of that,
when double blocking, your opponent can always choose to not kill one of your creatures. They have to kill something, but
they always have to kill the first ordered blocker.
Yeah, but they'll just order the one they don't want to kill.
Exactly. That's the thing, is that that's their decision. So they will ultimately not have to kill both if they don't want.
So damage is assigned. Most of the time it's going to be straightforward. Sometimes there's weird things going on. And then there's a end of combat. And end of combat is kind of like the upkeep, where that's where like creatures that say like, at the end of combat, sacrifice me, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's what it exists for. But there is some cool little wrinkles that you can get strategically here.
There's one specific one. So you almost never cast spells during your own end of combat. There's not really a huge reason to do that. What will happen more often is you have a card like Blessed Alliance that says sacrifice an attacking creature. Your opponent attacks you with a 5/5 and a 2/2. If you cast it, they'll sack the 2/2. Not great. What you do is you block their 2/2 with your 2/2, let damage happen. You take 5 from their 5/5, and then in the end of combat step, you cast Blessed Alliance. Their 5/5 is still an attacker, but it's the only one because the 2/2 traded off, and so then they have to sacrifice it. And that's something that has come up, in as many formats as there are sacrifice and attacking creature cards. So keep in mind that that's a trick you can use. You can actually do that during the combat damage step two. They're both steps you can use for that, but end of combat is generally, where they'll say that you're doing this.
Yes. And that is something that anytime we do a set review and we have a target, blah, 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 sacrifices an attacking creature, that's something that you should, Spidey sense should tingle like, oh, I got to remember how this works and brush up on that because it does actually come up sometimes.
Yes. And, you want to look for opportunities to know that that's in the range of how those cards work. Yeah. So then we're in the second main phase. During your own second main phase, this is where you play everything you didn't want to play before attackers. You play whatever creature you didn't want to tap out for. You play your land if you haven't played your land. So pretty simple. You play your cards.
Yeah. The main impetus behind a lot of this is just hiding information as well, right? Like, yeah. Information about what instant speed things you can have in your hand. That way you can leave your mana up by waiting until the second main phase. But also just your opponent can't make a good plan. If you're going to play a 5 mana 5/5 post combat, that might have changed the way they blocked if they knew that it was coming down before the attack. They may have preserved some more blockers or whatever. So this is just in the name of good strategic play here of not letting your opponent know what you're up to.
Yeah, I mean, you have a 2/2 unblockable. Your opponent might choose to chump block your 2/2, even though they normally wouldn't have.
Exactly.
But they don't want to fall to 2, and then you play that. So.
Yep.
During your opponent's second main phase, you're basically not going to use it. This is another one of those steps that you're not really going to use very often. If they have something like a beginning of the end step trigger that you want to kill that card before their end step, maybe this is when you do that, but for the most part, you're just not going to cast spells during your opponent's second main phase.
Yeah, it's weird because you think that would come up more often than it does, but it really doesn't come up often at all.
No, not very often. Then it moves to end of turn. You're not going to cast spells during your own end of turn unless your opponent does, basically. There's no reason to cast a spell during your own end of turn except for, if your opponent actually does something, because otherwise you would just do it during your second main phase pretty much.
Exactly.
But sometimes you say go, your opponent taps out for something, and then you play that instant that, that now they're tapped out. But you're not casting a whole lot during your own end step. Your opponent's end step, you're going to use a lot more frequently. This is where you just cast, your opponent says go, you're like, okay, now I'm going to use my removal spell. Now I'm going to cast my card draw spell. Now I'm going to, activate this ability. So your opponent's end step is something you're going to use pretty frequently.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
And the reason to do that there, by the way, is instead of like second main phases, they don't get to play their sorceries anymore once you do that.
Right, because as we mentioned before, anytime somebody puts something on the stack, once the stack is empty, you're still in that same phase. The active player will get priority again. If you did that during their second main phase, they would still be in their second main phase, and they'd have the option to play sorcery speed stuff like more creatures or whatever. You can take that away from them by waiting till their end step.
Yeah, and
you also get a little bit of extra information in the sense that your opponent has also told you, I am done. I don't have anything else I want to do for the turn, and that is a little bit of information as well.
And then for the most part, you're not going to use the cleanup step. But if your opponent goes to discard, this is a good thing to mention. If your opponent has 8 cards in hand and they go to discard, once they've discarded, you can't do anything because the turn is done.
Yeah, and the way that usually goes in real life is that they'll just ask you, can I go to discard or can I go to my cleanup step? But the thing about the cleanup step is that it's like the untap step and that you can't actually do anything during it. It's not a step that has priority in it. So once you're in it, that means that the turn is effectively over and all you're doing is just waiting for the player to actually have discarded that 8th or 9th card or whatever it is. And so the way it gets verbalized in real life is, can I go to my cleanup step or go to discard, they'll say often. And if you say, sure, what you're really saying is I'm passing priority of your end step. Like I'm foregoing the opportunity to cast or do anything this turn. And once they are in that, once they're finishing discarding, it's just your untap. It just happens. So be careful because it sounds similar to like go to my end step or end my turn, but that's not what they're actually asking you. If they say, I want to go to my cleanup and you have something you want to do on their end step, you have to say, before you do that, before you go to your cleanup or your discard step, whatever they want to call it, I want to do something on your end step. So here I go. And if you do that, well, that might affect which card they discard. That's why they get to know this information before you do it. So just be careful, because I've definitely seen people get caught where somebody goes, go to discard, and they go, sure, but they really wanted to do something on the end step and they didn't quite realize what they were agreeing to. But what the opponent is really saying is, I'm going to pass priority on my end step. Do you also do that? And if you say yes, well, then they're automatically in their cleanup step and they're discarding any additional cards and doing that stuff. So just be careful if your opponent is going to go to discard and you have an effect on their end step, to not let them discard until you have a chance to play something on their end step. That's just a small wrinkle, but it can make a huge difference, because when people do make that mistake, it's never what they intended. They never actually meant to let you go. They just didn't understand really what they were agreeing to. So now you know what you're agreeing to if they say, I want to go to my discard step.
And one thing I can say to wrap things up here is, what are the stops we use on Magic Online? Because this represents the stops that we use frequently enough to have them actually set.
Yes.
With the knowledge that we can set, like, for example, neither of us have an upkeep stop set on your opponent's upkeep, but sometimes if we have an effect, we'll just stop, we'll add the stop, use it, and then take the stop off. So
exactly.
I have my own main phase. I have both players' beginning of combat. Both players declare attackers. Both players declare blockers. My own second main phase and my opponent's end of turn. So I go relatively light.
You do. Yeah. And I actually go one step lighter than you do. The only difference between ours, which is really weird because everybody has totally different setups and ours were remarkably similar, was that I only have beginning of combat on my opponents. And the reason for that is because I do try to just crew vehicles and do things in my main phase before going to my declare attackers. I also feel like, especially given the rules that the way they sit now, that closely mimics real life and teaches me to not do things in my beginning of combat step, because it is often almost always against my best interest to do that. So I have that one turned off as well. But I have to say that, and I'll put these in the show notes too, just so you guys can get a list of them and you can try them out for you Magic Online players as well. But Luis and I are on the very light end of the spectrum. I mean, have you ever watched Kenji's stream? Everyone. Stop. Every stop, every stage of everything. Can't. Yeah, I don't understand it. And I'm not saying you can't make it work. He obviously never times out or whatever. He's fine. But like, I have it as stripped down as possible, and then I add them in like Luis described when I think it's necessary as well. And
I think having familiarity with these is important. And this is about as rulesy as we get to. We tend not to, focus this much on like the precise things, but really the takeaways here is like, when do you want to, or what are the sorts of things you want to do during each stop? Because it seems complicated, but honestly, it's not that complicated once you look at what you actually are doing. And I think the most complicated step for sure is just the declare blocker step when both players have the opportunity to play combat tricks. That's a little tricky. Other than that, it's really just not, it has a similar flow almost every game.
It does. And the stuff that Luis outlined here as far as when and how to do it is the real takeaway, because of course there's always exceptions. It's Magic. We're not under any delusions here. But when we're talking about playing thousands of matches of Magic, and the vast majority of the time these strategic elements come up during these specific times, well, that's enough of a heuristic and a pattern that we can go back to that and we can use it. And that's, hence the show here. And I agree, by the way. We usually try not to get like super deep on rule stuff just because, well, honestly, neither Luis or I are a judge and it can be very, touchy stuff. But this phases and steps from a strategic standpoint is really, really important. It really is. This separates out a lot of the fundamental misunderstandings that people have about Magic, about when they can do things and why. And if you study up on this, and I mentioned it before, but Magic Online is the best way to do it because it's right there in front of you. You can control it however you like. You can go light on the stops like Luis and I do, or you can go full on like Kenji. It's up to you. But the key here is that once you develop that understanding, it lets you manipulate these things and get a little more flexible with it because you understand when, why, and how you can do things. And as it stands, there's a natural flow to Magic, especially if you play in real life, that sort of just carries you through. And you don't have to have this level of understanding, but it's so much better if you do because it allows you to get creative and to really understand what's going on. And also makes sure that people don't do things wrong and that you let it happen. I've seen it happen so many times. Again, the timing on the blockers and all that kind of stuff where I'm just like, hold on, call a judge. Like you guys are just way wrong here. This person's trying to do something that's just straight up against the rules. They don't know it, but they're wrong. The other person's willing to let them do it somehow, but they just don't know either. And I had this happen at a PTQ at the table next to me. And I just said, you guys just need, like, I can't interfere with this, but you need to call a judge because you're just both way off here about how this thing, and the thing is, it's a huge difference. Like the way these two players had things playing out, the defending player was just getting completely blown out and and that should not have been the case at all. It in fact should have been the opposite, which is just absurd because it's probably a game deciding play. So anyway, defend yourself against that stuff too. And, you know, knowledge is power, etc. You'll have a lot of that. Okay. That is going to do it for the show this week. Hopefully you enjoyed our little mishmash of topics with our Crack-a-Draft thrown in there for good measure. If you want to find us on social media, it's very easy. I'm Marshall_LR. It stands for Limited Resources. And Luis is LSV. You know what it stands for. You can find us on everywhere. Twitter is kind of the main thing, but we have Twitch channels and all that kind of stuff. If you want to find really everything that we do, it's on lrcast.com right on the front page. There's just a list of links that link off to all of the stuff that we do for the podcast and around our own personal stuff as well. So you can find that on lrcast.com. Of course, I want to thank our sponsor, channelfireball.com, for helping us keep the show rolling and really being a big part of what we do here on Limited Resources. We value our partnership with Channel Fireball a lot. And, they have a lot of the same goals that we do as far as their content side goes, which is really providing value for you and helping you get better rather than just being there and kind of being entertaining. We really want to kind of get into it. And again, you got some of the best players in the world doing that. And hey, while you're there, great way to say thank you to Channel Fireball for all that free content. Buy stuff from them. You can get sealed product. You can get singles. You can get supplies, limited resources supplies even. They made that happen for us as well. And it's all there in one place, channelfireball.com. Thank you so much for listening every week. Luis and I always look forward to spending time with you, and we're really happy that you decided to check in on us. With that said, we'll see you next week. What's your sign off?
Well, I was actually slow rolling it because that's what the sign off is about.
That's terrible. At least you used the term correctly. But...
Well, that's what I wanted to say. All right. Because it is a very misunderstood term. I want to talk about slow rolls. This is a term people use so badly.
Drives me nuts because it's a poker term that Magic players stole and then just destroyed for some reason.
So what it actually means is when you have someone dead or beaten, taking your sweet time to show them.
That's right. That's right.
In an exaggerated, purposeful fashion.
That's right. And the goal of which is to hurt their feelings and make them feel bad.
Right. It is over-identified so much. So I'm going to give you examples of actual slow rolls, and then I'm going to tell you what is not a slow roll.
Okay.
An actual slow roll. This is at the Pro Tour. Player had sudden shock in their hand. 1 in a red. Instant. Deals 2 damage to a creature or player. Split second. While it's on the stack, no one can put anything new on the stack.
Meaning it's uncounterable, it's uninteractable with.
Right. The only thing you can do is like unmorph a creature because of weird rule stuff, but basically nothing.
Right.
Opponent was at 2. They had sudden shock. They played the game for 10 more turns before sudden shocking for the win.
Oh, man.
That's a slow roll.
Wow, that is a savage slow roll. All right.
Similar. Asking, very close game. Player draws it for their turn. Thinks, puts their hand face down. Ask the judge if they can go to the bathroom. Judge says, okay. Go to the bathroom. They come back. They flip over the burn spell that's in their hand. That's a slow roll.
That's not real, right?
I heard it was real, but it sounds apocryphal. I can't verify that one.
Oh, God.
Another one. This one is great. This is from, I'm not going to name the player who did this. Though I will say I have voted for them for the Hall of Fame, though they are not in the Hall of Fame.
I already know who it is then.
Yes. They draw for their turn. This is on Magic Online. They tell their opponent that their opponent is the luckiest person they've ever said, all this other stuff, and they disconnect. So when your opponent does that, when your opponent calls you lucky and disconnects, you know you've won.
You know you've won, yeah. You just have to wait your 10 minutes purgatory.
After 8 minutes... They log back on and cast a lethal burn spell.
No. So out of line.
It's insane because the dialogue that it takes to come up with that is absurd.
That is completely absurd. That is, wow. I've seen some of the sickest slow rolls in poker for thousands of dollars, and that absolutely rivals it. That is just mean. Oh my God.
The genius of it. I mean, it's horrible. I'm not saying do this.
No, but that is pure evil genius. Really. That is just unbelievable because that pattern, like, I would almost guarantee that with the exception of somebody looking away from Magic Online and accidentally timing out, that pattern has led to the person who disconnected losing every single time with the exception of this one in the history of Magic Online. That is just absurd.
Yeah. So their opponent thinks like, okay, whatever, this guy's being a jerk, but at least I've won the match. 8 minutes later, come back and I can't imagine what's going through your mind at that point. So that is a slow roll. That's the best slow roll that I've ever heard of.
Oh God, I just get shivers. That's so mean. That is so mean. Wow. Okay.
Another example of a slow roll is you not telling me that I had lost the showdown against Owen until well after I was already still guessing cards.
Yeah, that was good.
So those are slow rolls.
Yeah.
You know what is not a slow roll? Making sure you don't screw up. The thing I hate is when a player draws for their turn and they think and they like make sure it works. They attack with everything and then play their combat trick, and then their opponent blows up at them like, why are you slow rolling me? Why didn't you just kill me? I was just dead. The thing is, you don't get a reward for doing it quickly, but you do get punished if you screw up. So
totally.
I definitely don't want people to feel bad about like triple checking the math, especially in an important match. I've done that myself. Like, yeah, sure, sometimes you can just flip over your hand and you're like, I've got it. But you don't want to do that and be wrong. I've seen people do that, especially in their haste to not slow roll their opponent. So
wow. I've got a story that I heard today with that exact thing. And I'm going to call him out. Adam, my buddy who's been, he's traditionally been my buddy who's learning Magic, but he's just a Magic player now. Yeah. He went and did a modern or an Aether Revolt draft at a local shop. And he was telling me this today at lunch. And this happened to him because Adam's one of the nicest people I know. He's a truly, sweet guy. And he had his opponent with 3 creatures on board and a sky skiff, and his opponent was at like 1. And so he just needed to get any damage through it all. So he draws his card for the turn and it's Snarethopter. And he's like, oh my God, I did it. I drew it. But he plays it and he just attacks with the Snarethopter because he thinks, well, I don't want to slow roll, right? Like, I don't want to be a jerk about this. I just want to, and he even he's like, yeah, sorry, I top decked you or whatever. And the guy's like, crew my sky skiff block, because he had a total of 3 blockers, even with the skiff in the mix. And Adam then had 4 creatures. All he had to do is just turn all of them sideways. And I asked him, I said, did you do this to not slow roll your opponent? He said, yeah, because Adam's a poker player. He knows, how bad it feels to get slow roll. He's like, yeah, I just didn't want to, come off like a jerk. He was playing at a local game store and he's just like, if I just would have thought about it for 5 seconds, I would have just, attacked with everything. And I even reiterated it to him. I said, look, if I would have sent you the screenshot, you would have been like attack with play it, attack with everything. Like it's not like the strategic thing didn't happen. He was just trying to be polite, especially in a live setting. And it cost him, so he said, well, I'll make sure to take my time next time. But that does happen all the time. In fact, yesterday. You done?
Well, I wouldn't be slow rolling.
Are you still slow rolling? What about you? You didn't mention slow play, which is the thing that everybody uses in the wrong term in Magic. People usually use slow roll in the term of slow play, which is slow play, at least in poker, is when you don't act in order to disguise the strength of your hand. You just like, I'll just check and just play this one a little slower rather than blasting away with your really good hand to try to trap somebody. And for some reason, when it got translated into Magic, like if somebody had, let's say, a big threat that they could play, but if they waited a turn, they could play it and have a counterspell up. Somehow people started saying, well, he's slow rolling his big threat. It's like, no, he's really not. He's slow playing it if you want to stretch. But that's always, ever since I came back to Magic, I heard people saying that. I'm like, you don't know what that means. That's not what that means. You're just making things up.
Yeah, I think that for the most part, just play your game. Don't worry about it. But look, if you're not doing one of those like egregious examples that I'm talking about, you're not slow rolling. Don't worry about it.